And welcome, everyone. Greetings from St. Louis, Missouri, and the home of the Missouri Institute of Mental Health. My name is Tom Pansella with MIMH, and I'm very glad you've taken the time to join us today. I'll introduce our speaker to you in just a moment, but for those of you joining us the first time, welcome. For those who've been here before, welcome back. You'll see right underneath the video window that there is a chat link. If any time you want to ask a question or submit a comment, just type next to the word "say" and click that "say" button. That'll submit your question to us, and we'll ask them for you on your behalf. If you click the word "chat" right under the window, you're going to be asked for login information. That's the wrong button. Just click down next to the word "say." The first time you do it, you might have to give yourself a nickname. After that, it shouldn't matter. Also, underneath the video window, you're going to see several other links, some wonderful websites that we'll make reference to. Use those anytime as good resources through the program and following the program. We'll also send you those links in the email that follows today's program. Underneath that, you'll see the link to purchase CEUs. For those of you who are interested in continuing education credit, we will provide CEUs for this program for only $10 a person if you fill out the form during or following today's program. And below that, this is a commercial announcement because our speaker today is also going to be presenting at a conference here in Missouri, the MOPRA conference, which is coming up in just a few weeks. And so we have a link to register for that conference and to get more information about that as well. And so I would like to introduce you to Tamara Amin. And Tamara was treated with dialectical behavioral therapy for borderline personality disorder. She says that the quality of her life has significantly improved with relationships, happiness, and success at maintaining a job. DBT is a comprehensive program that includes group skills training and individual therapy, and she'd like to share her experiences in treatment, overcoming work and interpersonal problems. This is a preview, as I said, of a presentation that she's going to give at the MOPRA conference. Tamara's previously worked as a social worker here for the state of Missouri and as an adjunct professor at the St. Louis Community College. And Tamara, I'm turning this over to you now.
Thank you. I'm extremely excited to be here with you today to discuss my journey to obtaining a life worth living. I didn't make up the phrase obtaining a life worth living. It's the basis of DBT and the heart of the therapy. If you think about it, this makes total sense, because who among us wants to live a life that's not worth living? Who wants to live a meaningless, painful existence? Yet in the world of borderline personality disorder, very often existence is so painful and seemingly devoid of all meaning. Just existing is a constant discordant struggle with no hope or purpose, only never-ending nonsensical pain. So that's why DBT is so important and life-saving. DBT goes beyond cognitive behavioral therapy. Dialectical behavioral therapy changes not only your thinking or thoughts behind the actions, it changes your world perspective and offers skills training to cope with painful emotions and unpleasant interpersonal situations that otherwise a person would avoid or explode with rage over. There's no denying that thoughts drive actions, but sometimes the thinking behind the behavior is unclear. And I may be unable to access the thoughts behind my actions. But DBT has answers for this through practicing skills to become more insightful into my own actions. So first, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what DBT is all about. Then I will tell my story as I do for Respect Institute. Then I will talk about obstacles to therapy that I have overcome. And finally, I will tell you how I have made it through level 1 DBT and how I know I made it through level 1 DBT, because that's the exciting part. And it's a tall order, but that's what I hope to accomplish in 1 hour. Woo. So, in DBT, there's two parts, as the gentleman who was introduced me just said. There's interpersonal, there's like, you have your basic individual therapy, and then you have skills group treatment. It's like group therapy, but you learn skills there. And it's not like your basic, you know, I've been in group therapy before a long time ago at SLU Hospital and Clinic. And in regular group therapy, you go around, you talk about your problems, you talk about your issues, what you faced that week, what you've been overcoming, and the therapist kind of weighs in on things. But in DBT skills training, it goes into like 3 different sections. The first section, you do a mindfulness exercise, and you get in touch with your inner self and get calmed down through awareness. And they could be all different kinds of exercises, and they change every week. And then the next part of the skills training is you go through over your diary card. And a diary card is a card that lists all these different skills that you might have used over the week, and then it has all the days of the week. So if I used a skill, let's say I used Wise Mind one day of the week, I would circle that day, like I used it on Monday. So I'd circle Monday I used Wise Mind. So when I go to skills group, I can say, hey, Monday I used Wise Mind, and it triggers a thought in me that says, well, how did I use it? What did I use it for? What was the situation? So that I can explain how I used it and how it worked for me. And then the other participants in the group go around and talk about the skills they used and how it worked for them. And it's very beneficial because we all practice all of these skills that we never learned growing up to deal with situations. And it gives more of a basis to cope in the situation. So the skills modules that are taught in DBT are core mindfulness, which means being present and non-judgmentally aware in the moment. Distress tolerance, which is managing difficult feelings without acting impulsively, which can be a hallmark of people with borderline personality disorder. And one of the things I have the most problems with is acting impulsively. I try not to do that. I've had a lot of practice at trying not to act impulsively. And sometimes it works, and sometimes I still go and buy the car at the last minute. It's not a good thing. And then the next one is emotional regulation, learning to skillfully use or change emotions. And the last one is interpersonal effectiveness, relating skillfully with others, which can be very beneficial because if you think about it, we're always relating to others. And a hallmark of people my age with BPD, with borderline personality disorder, is that they say that we age out of the system, but we really don't. When you get to be my age, a lot of people with borderline will stop interacting with others because you've learned that it's just too painful. And they'll isolate themselves. And I looked at it a few years ago, and it made me so despondent that I was so depressed after reading that. I'm going, wow, I thought maybe you get better over the years, but you just learn how to avoid situations. And that's when I really wanted to get into DBT, because I'm not here to avoid life. I want to live life, so that's a big goal. DBT makes many assumptions about participants. First of all, and this is the dialectical part, people in DBT are doing the best that they can. And it's true, if you think about it, most of us are always trying to do the best we can to deal with things every day. And that's the first assumption, is that we're doing the best we can to deal with things. But the second assumption is that people in DBT want to improve. So you're doing the best you can, yet you can do better. So that's the dialectical. Both are true. They seem kind of opposite. If you're doing the best you can, how can you do better? But that's the dialectical part. You're doing the best you can, yet you have to do better. You can't live at your current level of existence. You don't want to live in constant pain, so you have to do better. So it's pretty ironic. So the third one is people in DBT need to do better, to work harder, and to be motivated to change. The lives of suicidal individuals are unbearable as they are currently being lived. And that makes a lot of sense. Because if your life's unbearable, you might be thinking about suicide. People in DBT must learn new behaviors in all areas of their lives. And the last assumption I believe is the most important. People cannot fail in DBT. And that is so true. No matter if you're there just one day and you decide you don't want to do DBT anymore, just to show up and have the courage to face your issues means that you have succeeded. Just to start is a success. It may take several starts to get anywhere, but just showing up at the starting line is a success. DBT makes many assumptions about therapists also. All therapists, no matter how well trained, are fallible. Everyone makes mistakes. We're humans. Come on. Therapists aren't perfect. And it's better to realize that we're not. We're not perfect. I trained as a therapist, but I've never actually worked as a therapist. But I've met a lot of therapists and been in a lot of therapy. And therapists are very good people. But everyone makes mistakes. The next assumption is we make every reasonable effort to conduct competent and effective therapy. Because if you think about it, no one wants to be incompetent, and we want all therapy to be effective. So we're going to assume that if you're here to treat people, that you want to be competent and you want to provide effective therapy. We obey standard ethical and professional guidelines. We are available for weekly therapy sessions, phone consultations, and provide needed therapy backup. And this is very essential, the phone issues. You know, people with BPD have notoriously burned people out through phone conversations. I know because early on, I was in so much pain, and I just wanted someone else to take this pain away from me. And I would call my doctor almost incessantly, and I know I was really burning him out. I don't know how he put up with me for 10 years, Dr. Fazil Yazin. He put up with me. I don't know how he did it. He's a saint. He got me through my 20s. If it hadn't been for him, I really wouldn't be alive. But it's very hard. So I believe there should be limits with phones, but that's for each individual therapist to decide. And a crucial part of DBT is phone therapy, because if I'm in a crisis and I don't know how to apply the skills to the situation, I need someone to help me to see where the skills fit in and how I can actually do this. And it's extremely helpful, because the therapist may see things that I can't see because I'm all tunnel visioned into the moment. And they may say, well, did you try such and such? And I'm going, oh, that would work perfectly. I should try that. I should try pros and cons right here because I can see the pros and I can see the cons. And it might help me make a decision because I don't want to be so indecisive in this moment. Well, thank you. You know, and it might only take 5 or 10 minutes. But to make that phone call, and as a client, it's very hard to reach out, especially since I'm a little older and I got diagnosed when I was 21. And I've been in the mental health system a long time. And I was always told, don't call me, don't call me, don't call me. So now all of a sudden this past year, it's please call. If you have an issue, please call. We want to hear from you. We want to help you get through this. It's like I go back and forth. I'm going, should I call this person? Should I not call? I should call, but I don't want to be upset with me. I don't want to overuse them. Well, I need to call. So I'll call, but it's tough. But it's one of those things that I think is very effective about DBT coaching calls. So, and the next one is therapists are available for weekly therapy sessions. Oh, I went over that one, sorry. We respect the integrity and rights of the patient. We maintain confidentiality. We meet regularly to obtain consultation and support to be effective in the work that we do. That's the last one, and it's very important. I know BJC Behavioral Health does their DBT in a team format, so that the group therapists and the individual therapists, they all meet together and they talk about everything that's going on. And I think sometimes they have the community support workers there, or they have notes from the community support workers, and they can see the whole picture of everything that's going on and the different issues that you're having with each person, you know, that the client's having with the therapist, or maybe they had an issue in group that you might not know about, and it's very important. And they provide support and backup for each other. The targets of DBT treatment are decreasing high-risk suicidal self-harming behaviors, decreasing therapy-interfering behaviors by either therapist or patient, decreasing quality of life interfering behaviors, learning and mastering behavioral skills for mood-independent life choices, decreasing symptoms related post-traumatic stress, other anxiety and depression, enhancing and sustaining self-respect, and then additional goals set by the patient to create a life worth living. In St. Louis, I don't know anyone that's doing stage 2 DBT, but I know BJC does stage 1. And I'm going to talk mainly about stage 1 DBT in this session. And the stage 1 goals are decreasing or eliminating life-threatening behaviors, suicidal attempts, suicidal thinking, self-injury, homicidal and aggressive behaviors, decreasing or eliminating therapy interfering behaviors, missing sessions, not doing homework, behaving in a way that burns others out, reducing or eliminating hospitalization as a way of handling crisis, decreasing behaviors that interfere with quality of life, eating disorders, not going to work or school, addiction, chronic unemployment, increasing behaviors that will enable the person to have a life worth living, and increasing behavioral skills that help to build relationships, manage emotions, and deal effectively with various life problems. There's 4 stages, so there's 3 other stages, but I'm not going to go through them at this time. Okay, so now I'm going to briefly give you my story as I tell it for the Respect Institute. I used to think that my story was not valuable and that no one wanted to hear what I have experienced, but now I know that my story has worth and can be beneficial for others to hear. I have borderline personality disorder, but I am not a borderline. My illness does not define who I am. My childhood was not the best. My mother told me frequently when I was a small child that she did not want me. She wanted my sister, but not me, so I clung to my father. My dad finally told her to stop telling me this. My parents divorced when I was 8. I was in the hospital with a ruptured appendix when my mother came in with her new boyfriend and told me I wouldn't have to see my father anymore because they were getting a divorce. I was devastated, and after she left, I decided I didn't want to live anymore, that I wanted to kill myself at 8 years old. I walked across my hospital room with my IV and attempted to open the window so I could jump. The nurse came in and asked what I was doing. I told her I was trying to open the window because it was stuffy. She said, "This is the 7th floor. The windows don't open," and she turned up the air conditioning. I resigned myself to living and taking care of my drug addict mother and my little sister. A few years later, my mother married my stepfather, and the abuse I suffered became worse. I would hide in the closet to get away, and when under stress, I would leave the situation by disassociating. I felt like I was looking down on what was happening from the ceiling, and that this really wasn't happening to me. I maintained good grades in school and graduated in the top 20% of my high school class. I went to college on a mixture of scholarships and did well the first semester. The second semester, I lost my debate scholarship due to lack of funds for the school. I had to get a part-time job to pay for room and board, and the stress was mounting. I had a one-night stand with a guy I'd known since high school. It was my first time with a guy, and I knew I was pregnant right afterwards. And then I got the blood test from the doctor, and yes, I was pregnant. The pressure kept mounting, and even though I was working full-time, I couldn't maintain a residence and became homeless in the last month of my pregnancy. I don't remember that much about the time period, except for I got into public housing and had my baby. It might have been in the reverse order. I might have had my baby and got into public housing. I went back to college the next semester, and the stress was overwhelming. One of my professors told me that the hospital had helped him with his stress, and he felt it would help me. He drove me to the hospital, and this started a long dependence on hospitals. I felt safe and cared for in the hospitals, feeling that I didn't get much in my life. I especially liked the quiet room because it was like my closet, and I felt so safe and pleasant when I was in there. Somehow I finished college, although I would drop out every other semester to go to the hospital. During this time, my son's father became his primary custodial parent, although we had joint custody. I had a great deal of perseverance and graduated college, then moved to St. Louis for a job with the Division of Family Services. Unfortunately, my hospitalizations increased. My son stayed in Springfield with his father. I felt a horrible rage towards myself, and I would try to kill myself. I didn't think of this as suicide. I felt like I was trying to murder myself because I had caused all the pain in my life, and I wanted to get rid of me. I would overdose on a Friday night, and I would either con my way out by Sunday night, or I would leave against medical advice, so I could be at work on Monday. My most serious attempt was in December of 1997 when I almost died from an overdose. I finally realized that I could actually die. It was as if I never realized that I could succeed at suicide and what the consequences were of this behavior. I decided I wanted to live and that I would actually cooperate with my doctor and try to get better. I had electroconvulsive therapy. I was scared about it at first, but soon I didn't know where I was or what I was doing. I was getting bilateral ECT. I wasn't taking my medicine because I couldn't remember anything. ECT causes short-term memory loss, so I forgot to eat and do other basic life functions. My roommate soon realized what was going on and took over my care until my ECT was over. About 2 weeks after the treatment ended, I felt a tremendous uplift. The doctor had also put me on Zyprexa, and I felt so good, better than I had my whole life. I went back to work at DFS and was such a great employee that I was promoted to Children's Services. After about 2 years, this great feeling wore off, and I started getting stressed out again. I had to take a disability leave from my job in 2003. I kind of drifted for a while, and then I decided I wanted the best care possible. I called up one of my professors from graduate school, and she recommended I see Dr. Gerald Kreisman. I was amazed that she knew him because he wrote the book on borderline personality disorder, and because of her reference, I got in to see him. He was so sharp, he picked up in my speech that I used wanting and needing interchangeably. I told him I thought that they were the same thing since the only time I felt anyone wanted me around was when I was needed. He told me that people could want me around without needing anything from me. My whole life, I felt loved only when I was needed. I let go a lot of my anger through my work with Dr. Kreisman, and I felt a huge weight lift off of me. Unfortunately, my time with him ended because I felt he really cared about me and went out of his way to help me. This really scared me because I'd never felt like anybody really cared about me before, and I ran away from him to someplace more impersonal, St. Louis University Clinic. I liked this clinic because I felt they were on the cutting edge of medicine, and I felt I was helping to train new doctors. In 2007, I was assigned to Dr. Stacy Neff. She introduced me to cognitive behavioral therapy, where I replaced my suicidal thoughts with positive ones. This was very difficult to do at first, but seems more automatic now. I very rarely think of suicide now, and if I do, I stop myself and see what's really going on with me. I've been doing better because of the support I get from the Independence Center. The Independence Center is a psychosocial rehabilitation facility that focuses on the work-ordered day. This helps me work through the problems I have when I'm employed. I have become less dependent on medications to control my symptoms and have become more proactive about my role in recovery. It was easier when I thought the medicine could do all the work for me. Now I know that I am responsible for my own recovery. This is an awesome responsibility, one that I take very seriously. I have the power to control my behavior, and my progress in healing depends on my actions. I've had some great accomplishments over the past year. I started treatment with BJC Behavioral Health last February and started DBT last June. I have had almost a year of DBT therapy, and my progress has been miraculous. A year ago, I was despondent but ready for a change. Since learning new skills and practicing what I've learned, my life is now very worth living. I have worked through many of the problems that have plagued my whole working career, and acceptance comes much easier to me. I have learned that I am not so different from everyone else, but that my reactions may be a bit different through my learned environmental experiences. I have learned to accept myself and feel my emotions without being overwhelmed by them. I can still act and live even while experiencing life. DBT has been a lifesaver for me, even though I was already past my active suicidal days. It made my life worth living, something I didn't think was possible. I love my life. So that was my story, as I tell it with Respect Institute. So the next thing I'm going to talk about are some of the therapy interfering behaviors that I've had to overcome in the past year. One of the first behaviors that I had was doing the diary card daily. And sometimes I still struggle with this. It is very important to do at the end of each day as a recap of skills I've used and how effectively they worked for me. So, me and my therapist did this whole wonderful little chart of why I should do my diary card. Why I don't want to do it, the pros and cons, it's not fun. I don't want to do it, but it's helpful because I see what I did and I get to reflect back. And I had negotiated for a time that instead of just using the diary card, I would journal about the skills I used and the outcomes. And I'm glad I did that because it gave me a lot of material to use for the speech that I do. But it became kind of cumbersome, so I went back to just doing the diary cards. Some of the barriers I had to doing the diary cards was it was too much work, it was overwhelming. My feelings were that I couldn't move, that I had too much despair and regret. The rewards were that I felt accomplished and that I got insight into myself if I did the diary cards. Some of the consequences to not doing the diary cards were that I wouldn't gain an understanding of self and that my pace of progress may be slow. And that was very, very motivating to me because I want to get this over with as soon as possible. And of course, then I realized later, it's a lifelong process. So it doesn't matter how fast you go. But at the time, I wanted to get done. So that was the thing we went through about the diary cards. And I'm a little better with them. The second behavior that was interfering for my therapy was willfulness. And that's very hard to address. We had a hard time. It would sneak up in odd moments. And it was very hard to put a face on my willfulness. And I would deny that I was even willful at all. And it was very tough to pin down and identify. So my therapist had me draw a picture of my willfulness. And I don't know if you can see this picture, but it's of a little monster. You probably can't see it. It's of a little hairy monster. And that's my willfulness. And it's pretty amazing. But just to have a picture of it, doesn't matter if you can see it or not, just to have a picture of my willfulness helps me know, because when I feel the willfulness coming on, it's like I'm a very visual person, and I see everything very visually. So when I'm in a situation, all of a sudden I can feel willfulness coming on, I'm going, oh, I can see my willfulness, because I drew the picture. So it's pretty awesome. The last interfering behavior I had, and it's not just therapy interfering, it's more life interfering, was I realized I have work avoidance issues. And they plagued me my whole career. I was an excellent social worker, an excellent professor, if I was there. But if I get too stressed out, I don't want to go to work. And I'm sure everyone faces that problem. It was just more to an extreme for me. So we charted and went moment by moment on this one day when I called into work. And it was very helpful for me to see this, and I'm going to share it with you. It was on a Saturday. At 6 a.m. I got up and my thoughts were, there's no way I can make it through work. I can't do this. And so I felt anxiety. And then at 7 a.m., it's like anxiety, panic, fear, shame. I had a bunch of days off, like I had 3 days off in a row, and I was going to go back to work. And I'm going, oh, this is too hard. So at 7, I tried calling work to call off, but there was no answer because I was calling too early. The arch doesn't open up till like 9 a.m., and I was calling off at like 7 a.m. So I did 2 coaching call attempts. I don't know why, but it seems like I have a hard time reaching my coach. So, but thank goodness I don't have that severe behavior, so I didn't need her that much. So, and then I called BHR, Behavioral Health Response, just to talk. And then at 7:30, I finally got a hold of work, and I definitely called off. And then I thought of all the vulnerabilities of why I was so stressed out and why I didn't want to go to work. I didn't sleep well the night before. I hadn't been eating right. I had had a bunch of days off before. I didn't ask for these days off. These were just days off in the schedule. I don't do well with days off. It's interesting. I don't do well with time off. If I can work like in a row, I'm fine. But you give me some days off, and then the next day I have to go back to work. It's so much harder. And I don't know if everyone faces this, but it's really hard for me. And then I've got fear of negative feedback. I don't know what was going on at work, but for some reason I was fearful of getting some type of negative feedback, and it was really shutting me down. And so then the next thought after I called off was, I could go to Independence Center, but I didn't. And at 8 a.m. I headed to the hospital at SLU because I had a massive dependency on the hospital. Thank goodness I've broken my dependency on the hospital, and I'm going to talk more about that at the conference, how I did that. But that day I went to the hospital, and I didn't want to eat anymore. I was doing like a passive, kind of suicidal thing where I didn't want to eat. And then Friday night I didn't go to bed until like 10:30, so then I thought I might need to go to the hospital because it was like Saturday morning when I was supposed to get up and work at the Arch. And so they kept me overnight in the hospital. And then I was home. And of course, it doesn't take away the problems. So we had to go through all this and see what the problems were. And so my therapist had me look up avoidance. And avoidance is the act or practice of keeping away from or withdrawing from something undesirable, reinforced by escape or avoidance of electrical shock. And this is from the dictionary. There's avoidance learning, especially an anticipatory response undertaken to avoid a noxious stimulus. For me, that noxious stimulus is work. I like work, and I'm a very good employee, but it's just hard sometimes. So those are the problems I had to overcome for therapy in order to get through level 1 DBT. So some of the myths that hindered my progress was I always want people to like me. I'm very much a people person. I want everyone to really just adore me. And I thought I should have all people like me. And that my myth was I always thought that I should have people like me. If they don't like me, they may try to hurt me in some way if they don't like me. And because I think I've done something wrong, so they don't like me. Like it's my fault if you don't like me. But I had to realize this is not the case. There's people every day you meet that you just don't like, and you don't know why. You just don't like them. And there's nothing really you can do to make people like you. So I had to learn to live with that. And I used to also think the second myth that was really strong for me was that anger will kill me. But it's not the anger that's so serious. It's my response to the anger. It's not the emotion itself. So I said it's okay to be angry and experience it fully. Angry will not hurt me. Anger will not hurt me. I can let go of others' actions. I am not responsible for what they feel or do. Emotional pain is okay to have. It helps me to grow. That's some really hard stuff. But I always thought my rage would kill me. And it almost did a couple of times through the suicidal attempts. It was more my actions through the rage. So, really the last thing I'm going to talk about is recognizing dialectical dilemmas in treatment. I have a handout that we're going to switch to here if I can. And I'm going to talk about, it's a little chart. And I had to get through all of these different behaviors. I had them in different areas. The areas that I had the most problems with were the mask, pushing down feelings, and emotional vulnerability. Because I had dealt with my unrelenting crises and desperate behaviors already. So the one I want to talk about the most is the mask. I always wanted to be so capable. I always made people think that I could do everything and that I should be able to do it better than I actually could. I felt inadequate, incompetent, and defensive while I was engaging in that behavior. So I'm going to talk about how I took off the mask. It was very hard to do. So, and I had to feel the emotions. I had been pushing them down. So I had to do both things at the same time. I had to stop pushing down the emotions, and I had to take off the mask. And this is what I wrote while I was going through it. It's hard to let the sadness and anger and disappointment in and to feel them without guilt mired in depression. It would be much easier to medicate the feelings away, but less productive. It's comforting to use the skills and know that this won't last forever, but that I will prevail. It's funny, but I can take some comfort in the realization that this is all part of the healing process. It's hard for me to lose that mask of competency that I have used for so long to cope and to shield myself from the world's eyes, that I might not be all that I appear. Just because I want to be totally competent doesn't mean that I am, and it's so much better to be myself for all that entails. The more I lose my mask of competency, the more competent I see I actually am. No need to fake it until you make it. I can be just who I am, and if that isn't good enough for you, oh well. I can see what I can actually do and feel, and others can see me for who I am, a flawed, imperfect human, just like everyone else who may make mistakes, who takes responsibility for those mistakes most of the time, and tries to do better. Ultimately, all we really can do is the best that we can. This can change from moment to moment, and sometimes I can pull out some pretty fabulous stuff, but sometimes just being here is enough. Feeling emotions is tough and can feel like the emotion won't end, but I know from experience that nothing lasts forever. The skills are invaluable, but must be practiced in order to call upon them in times of need. I hate grieving and the grieving process, but through experiencing it, I hope to someday get through it all. And that's how I got through it. It took me like a month to take off the mask of competency. And it took me about a month to take off the mask of competency, and now I can't even put it back on anymore. I mean, who you see is who you get, and it really, I'm glad. I'm glad I can't go back to that anymore, because I feel so much more real, so much more in the moment, so much more who I am. And it's just awesome. It's awesome to be me today. So the last thing I want to talk about is how I got through level 1 DBT. And I'm not going to go through it all because I'm going to save something for the conference. So I'm not going to talk about the actual struggle that last week until we get to the conference, but I'm going to give you a little taste of what I went through. I can remember the struggle I went through in my 20s, the pain, the rage, the fear, the loathing I had for myself. I reasoned that if my mother couldn't love me, I must be unlovable to even myself. I didn't feel worthy of my own love and regard for myself. And it was that love that kept me alive the whole time. It was like a splitting of myself, a battle to survive, a battle to kill and punish for perceived lack of goodness or mistake or fault upon myself. And yet the other half of myself wanted to live and loved myself so deeply, yet I couldn't acknowledge it. And this is just a taste of the story to come at the MOPR conference. The conflict between the two sides and which side won. So that's it. And now I'm ready for any questions.
All right. I have a question come in here. People should be teased about that MOPR conference now. If that doesn't tease you, I don't know what will. All right. It seems that you've made some excellent progress in therapy and gained a considerable amount of personal insight. Given that, what recommendations would you give to mental health professionals that might help them become more effective therapists?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I mean, haven't they written book upon book about this question? I mean, the only thing I could really say is, if you're a mental health professional, to really feel what you're feeling, because a lot of times you'll get feelings from the client. It helps to be very intuitive and to identify what feelings you think about the client and what feelings you're actually feeling for yourself. So I think you have to be very in tune with yourself and your own response to the client, and just be very aware in the process of what's going on around you.
Another person asks, as a mental health professional who struggles with depression and years of invalidation, says this is a comment that it was fabulous to hear someone talk about the mask of competency. Also wanted to answer a question that came in for somebody else. Somebody had written in a question about people in the St. Louis area who offer stage 2 to 4 DBT. Apparently they're exposed to only the stage 1. I checked in with our DMH contact, and we'll include these names in the follow-up email, but Ryan Lindsay with the St. Louis Center of Family Development and Shannon Harting of the Jewish Children and Family Services have formal training in the exposure protocols that are used for trauma, which is typically the focus of the stage 2 work, and I thank Rhonda for that response, folks. We actually don't have any more other questions come in at this point, so we will say goodbye to everyone here. Again, if you're interested in continuing education credit, use the link beneath the video window, and we'll also send that link in the follow-up email. The link to the MOPR conference is there, well, where you can hear the rest of the story, as they say. And with that, we will say goodbye to Tamara, and we will say thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon and taking time to be with us. Our next program is on September 18th. All the information is up on the website. There's going to be several of them popping up there, so make sure that you're tuned in. Thank you again. And thank you, Tamara.
Thank you.